In the 1700s, Russian merchants and fur trappers spread throughout Siberia, arriving in Alaska in 1732. Over the next several decades, around 700 Russians resided in this territory. In 1821, Tsar Alexander I declared Russia's sovereignty over the Pacific coast of North America, north of the 51st parallel. John Quincy Adams, the U.S. Secretary of State, strongly protested this decree, as it could threaten future U.S. commerce and its desire to expand. In return, the Tsar agreed to a treaty in 1824 that limited Russian claims to territory north of the parallel 54 degrees and 40 minutes, along with opening Russian ports to American ships. Emperor Alexander II and the Russian government discussed selling this territory in the late 1850s. One of the main reasons was that Russia had recently been defeated by Britain and France in the Crimean War and needed money. Along these lines, the Alaskan territory would be challenging to defend in future wars. The Russians approached both the British and Americans in 1859. The British turned them down due to the fact that Canada, which is still one of their territories, already had vast areas of wilderness, and that managing Alaska on top of all its other colonies would stretch their resources too far. The Russian minister to the United States, Edouard de Stocqueville, held meetings with American officials, especially American Secretary of State John Appleton, in the winter of 1859. The Americans informally said that they would be willing to pay $5 million in 1859 worth, with the Russians finding this to be too low, but preparations were made for future discussions. However, they were postponed, given that rising tensions and the risk of a civil war were more pressing concerns. After the conclusion of the Civil War in 1865, the Tsar directed de Stocqueville to resume negotiations with William Seward, the U.S. Secretary of State, which began in March 1867. President Andrew Johnson and Seward thought that the purchase could help shift attention away from domestic issues, like Reconstruction. A treaty was signed on March 30th, 1867, with a purchase price of $7.2 million, $112 million in today's value. This was equal to about 2 cents per acre. Although many Americans believed that the purchase process had been corrupt, for the most part the press and general populace supported it. Some newspapers, like the New York Tribune, opposed the purchase, and it was given the moniker of Seward's Folly, or While Russia, but generally, the persistent historical myth that the purchase of Alaska was largely unpopular is fake. After the purchase, many of the remaining Russian citizens chose to return to Russia. American settlers rushed to the territory soon after its purchase, but found that large initial investments were needed to utilize its resources, most of which could be found in locations closer to the lower 48 states. Most of these settlers left shortly after arriving, but the Klondike Gold Strike of the late 1890s brought a significant number of people to the territory.